Honors Mentorship Program. With this program, we are able to intern a professional for this school year, and we create a project called the Capstone. So for this past year, I have been interning with Mrs. Lindsay Simpson. She is the prevention specialist in Forsyth County. I'm interning with her because I aspire to be a psychologist because I want to help people. So as I've been interning with her, she has allowed me to sit in on many meetings while she, along with many other professionals, begin to implement and develop prevention programs as a response to an increase in suicidal ideation, self-injurious behavior, anxiety, and depression within our county. So while I've been sitting in these meetings with her, I formed my essential question, which is, how can mental health professionals assess collected data to devise and implement effective prevention programs? So, with my research, I realized to answer my question, I had a bunch of smaller questions that I needed to answer. So my first question is, how do mental health professionals identify a significant change in the mental wellness of a society? What research are they looking at and how are they collecting that data? My second question is, how do mental health professionals decide what programs to implement? What makes them choose one program over another? My third question is, what works best when implementing these programs? Do you need to start small to reach the biggest number of people, or do you just start with your entire population? Things like that. My fourth question refers to the society, because mental health is a very taboo topic. It's not talked about. So I want to know, how are mental health professionals fighting the stigma? What are they doing to jump over this hurdle? And my last question is, what are the programs that mental health professionals are beginning to implement? What are they actually doing to address mental health? So before I began my research, I assumed some things. And I think my assumptions were valid, but I've learned a lot more about them. So I based my assumptions off of personal experience. I was never taught about mental health. No one ever taught me that suicide was a thing. Like, I learned everything by myself. In middle school, we have sex education, we have drug education, we have alcohol education, but mental health is never mentioned. So I kind of assumed that the rest of the United States was like this as well. Because there is such a big stigma around it, no one talks about it. So how I researched my essential question, most of it comes from Mrs. Lindsay Simpson. She's been very open and very honest with me about what she does in her job, how she achieves her research, things like that. Also, Mrs. Katie Newman has answered a bunch of questions. She's also a member on the Board of Education's office in Forsyth County. And then I have also done some independent research about academic journals, and I've created annotated bibliographies about that research. So now we're going to answer my question. So my first question was, where is this data coming from and how are they analyzing this data? So many mental health professionals do utilize surveys, especially within the school systems. Students take the Georgia Student Health Survey every single year. And Ms. Simpson analyzes and utilizes that data in a bunch of her meetings. However, I have realized that in Forsyth County, professionals have actually made observations about the people in the community. Meaning, professionals have realized that students have begun to find their validation with external sources, i.e. social media. So students that have a low number of likes, followers, equate themselves with lower self-worth than those who have higher numbers. And the ones that have higher numbers are concerned about their numbers getting lower because then their self-worth decreases. And Forsyth County has also been able to identify that a lot of students are beginning to romanticize suicide on their social media posts. So as a response to these two realizations, they have created specific committees and prevention programs that they're going to begin to implement. So overall, I've learned that the best professionals can't just rely on statistics. They look at their community as a whole and not just numbers. They make actual observations about the people within their society. My second question was, how are these professionals choosing one committee over another? So I found that collaboration is most often how these decisions are made. So when a specific issue is identified, say suicide, a committee is created. This committee is dedicated to their cause, and they meet regularly to analyze that data and their actual observations. And they research different prevention programs that they're able to implement. Also, these committees will often look to peer communities that may have already implemented a prevention program and base research off of what they're experiencing now with that community. I researched a school system in Connecticut, and this is how I answered number 3, which is how are professionals beginning to implement prevention programs. So they have to start small. The school system in Connecticut started with small focus groups of students because they realized that they had this huge bullying problem. So they started with these focus students and taught them about coping mechanisms with bullying, how to deal with bullies, who to tell, things like that. But they also educated their teachers. So these teachers were scared to intervene with bullying because they didn't have the resources to feel like that they would be effective in preventing bullying. So they started from the top, educated the teachers that are in contact with the kids day in and day out. They've created this huge change because now these teachers are able to talk about bullying in their day-to-day school lessons. So they can teach about grammar, but they can be analyzing sentences that have to deal with bullying. So this has created a completely different social change. So I think this sets an excellent example for other communities because it not only exemplifies that bullying can be reduced, but that if you implement a change effectively, you can create a change within your society. It also indicates that it's not just the youth that needs to be educated. Adults need to be educated on these topics as well, so that a change can be created. It also makes me think, if bullying can be a topic regularly addressed in school systems, why can't mental health be as well? So my 4th question was, how are mental health professionals fighting the stigma? Overwhelmingly, I have learned that they have to start a conversation. Communication is the only way to fight the stigma. So Forsyth County has held 2 events this year that I have been able to attend that started the conversation. The first event is called the Suicide Summit, and this was a very emotional event. It was hard to sit through, and I most definitely cried. But again, it begun the conversation. So the first part of it was facts and statistics about suicide and how our youth is being affected by suicide currently. And then the second part, we had a panel of widows that were widows due to suicide. Their significant others had committed suicide. And they talked about their experiences. They talked about how they coped with their losses, how their children had coped with these losses. And I think this was a great way to begin the conversation, even though it was hard to sit through and listen to. The second event that I actually was able to develop with Mrs. Simpson was called Wake Up. And Wake Up is divided into 2 parts. The first part is Ghost Out, which is a staged car crash. And this car crash happened because a student was driving under the influence. They were drunk. And they crashed head-on with a family. This car crash ended in 2 casualties. And what happened at this event was we had the cars there, we had actors there acting like they were dead, like they were drunk, that driver. And we had first responders come in. We had police cars, we had ambulances, we had a fire truck, we had a helicopter fly in. And we even had criminal investigation vehicles come in because there were 2 bodies that needed to be examined. So this event was very visual, and it was a great way to show students that drunk driving has these kinds of consequences, and so many people are involved when something like that happens. The second part is Teen Maze. Students walk into this maze and are given a scenario. The scenario can relate to drunk driving, violence, whether that be gun violence or threatening to harm a teacher, or even teen pregnancy. So just to give you an example of what it was like, when I actually went through the maze, I drew the scenario of drunk driving. So I was driving under the influence, I crashed, and I killed my best friend that was in the car with me. So the first stop in the teen maze was impaired driving. I got in this golf cart with a policeman and had drunk goggles put on me, which simulated the experience of being drunk. And I had to drive through this course that was made of cones, and I ran over a lot of cones. It wasn't good. So after that, I went back inside and I got handcuffed with actual metal handcuffs and was put in a jail cell that was 8 by 8 feet. And after that, I went to my best friend's funeral. Her eulogy was read aloud, and then I went to court, and so on. So this event really, again, tries to demonstrate to the kids that their actions have so many more consequences than they may realize. It's a great way for kids to make these mistakes and suffer the consequences without actually having to go through all of these hardships. So my last question is, what are these programs Forsyth County is beginning to implement? So the first one is Sources of Strength, which is a program that aims to change the social norms of a society while also preventing bullying, suicide, and substance abuse. Forsyth County now has 2 counselors that are trained to be Sources of Strength trainers, and they are going to begin to inform our county the next school year. The second one is Signs of Suicide, which is exactly what it sounds like. We're beginning to implement it with our 7th and 9th grade students this year, and its goal is to educate the youth about the signs of suicide so that they can identify these signs within their peers and hopefully get them the help that they need. As a part of my research, I actually read an article by a professor that teaches future social workers. So she's teaching the future generation. And she has started to implement education on the signs of suicide within her class because so many social workers are uneducated in this topic because it's not talked about, because it is a taboo topic and you don't talk about suicide. So I thought that this was really interesting because we're starting to educate the youth now about the signs of suicide, and maybe we're starting to see that change in our society. The last program that Forsyth County is beginning to implement is school-based mental health services, but this is still really a work in progress. So instead, I would like to focus on a part of a book that I read called Mental Illness. And this author suggests that school systems need to begin to start providing mental health screenings to their students. Because what happens if someone is affected by a mental illness, they're very likely to drop out of high school. They're not able to finish their education because of this illness. And the school system should care about that because the point of a school system is to educate their community. And if they're not able to complete that goal, then they should try to do something to help those suffering. So if school systems were able to identify the mental illness in kids when they're younger, then hopefully we could provide them with therapy, medicine, whatever they need so they can finish their education. This is an advanced solution to solving the problem of mental illnesses, but we've already made great strides, and I hope to see that solution happen soon. So overall, the answer to my question is far from simple. But to summarize, professionals need to not only rely on physical data to comprehend the mental wellness of a society. It is essential that professionals collaborate with each other, and programs have to start small in order to be most effective. All these components will lead to a successful prevention program in the community. And then finally, we have to fight the stigma together. Mental health is a taboo topic, but we can work along with mental health professionals to begin the dialogue and to fight this together.